Welcome again, our viewers, to the Shared podcast. We are here today again. Thanks again for following us, for subscribing. Do subscribe. Hit that button. Subscribe to get our latest debates, our latest discussions that we normally have here in the studio. We have some of the most important guests. Who tackle a lot of difficult issues that we have in the country. Not only that, but also providing solutions. So we really appreciate you. We see subscriptions going up. We see your views. We see the likes. So here we are again, the Shares podcast, and in studio again I've got Mhlakazi. We are here again.
Yes, no, definitely. We're back, Nkosi man. And indeed, a big thank you to our viewers who are trusting us, who are viewing, who are sharing, who are liking, who are subscribing. And indeed, we're back again and at it, discussing issues, shining the light on issues, discussing personalities which have had a contribution to the country. Personalities who have shaped this country. Sometimes you look at only people whom celebrate every day. There are people who have shaped this country.
Absolutely.
Like our guest today.
Our guest today. Before we get to that, let's appreciate the man behind the cameras who makes this magic.
Bongani
Pikinini behind the scenes, the technical guy who's making sure everything goes accordingly.
Dr. Pikinini, I always imagine doing.
That's what I thought.
To me, to Pikinini, so ngathi ngubongani into encinci. Yeah. But Bongani Pikinini is doing an amazing job. A job which is appreciated. Mhlakazi out there. They are very impressed. Say, hey guys, quality, technical production is amazing. That's Bongani Pikinini.
Absolutely. So today in our studio we've got I call him a resident. He's back again to this channel.
Yes,
it's not the first time he's here.
Definitely.
He's a man of such stature. Mhlakazi, Zolani Mkhiva. He's here. Mkhiva.
Yes.
Zolani Mkhiva. He's here again in the studio. Welcome again, Zolani.
Thank you, my brother. Thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure to be here. And thank you for inviting me once again. Much appreciated.
And we tap into your knowledge about various things. But it's also good to talk to you about you. And shine the spotlight on you as an individual, on you as one of those South Africans who have added value and South Africans who have touched the lives of ordinary South Africans. South Africans who have assisted. Because when you've shared the stage or you've rubbed shoulders with important people in your life, one way or the other, you've contributed.
Absolutely.
You've enabled the importance and the stage of those people to contribute to society. So
it's a very, very chilled session today. I mean, we want to drill into the person. Ubani Zolani Mkhiva. Where were you born? And how was your upbringing?
For you, it's a very, very chilled conversation, but when you become an item on the agenda, it becomes the most difficult one.
The focus is on you.
For me, this is so unchilled. Anyway, as you say, my name is Zolani Mkhiva, and I'm born in the province of the Eastern Cape, in a small town called Dutwa, in a village called Bolotwa. And I actually grew up in 3 villages, Bolotwa, Lota, and Nabane. Because my family is spread across those. And of course, my father was a community leader who is recognized in those locations. So he has a footprint in all of them. And I grew up as someone, who grew up in the Bundus, looking after the livestock of my father, in the veld, and going into the major rivers, Umbashe and Umgwali, because those locations are interlocked between those. So I grew up in the Dada, that is Xhosa, Ubethi Qambu, sikhwela amaqegu, egusha, lebhokhwe, sikhula sibetha intonga. And these are some of the things that really shaped me in the early years. And this was the only recreation we had. You know,
There was no PlayStation themselves.
Yeah, no
There
PlayStation.
was no PlayStation.
Yeah, no Netflix.
Only then when you become at a particular level, then the sport, as in football, isoka iye yafika nayo ke sangena kuyo. But in the main, I think what really grounded me, you know, and rooted me into our culture are those indigenous games.
Yes.
Iqegu, ileqi, you know, no data. That is Gagabu.
Utata Mhlekazi is
Umlabalaba, you don't play Umlabalaba.
You know, when we were younger, besidlala into ekuthiwa ngunochele. Then Umlabalaba was amongst those.
Yes.
Yes,
Which one were you good at?
Well, I think I would say I was good kunochele kodwa undibona ndibiza ukudada nobetha iqaba ubetha isigagambu yenye yezinto ebendiyenza kakhulu like yona nto so ukudada
So you could have gone to Olympics had it not been the disadvantages of growing in the rural areas, basically.
Yes, I could have been in that in the swimming.
So that thing that black people can't swim is a lie.
Yes,
He grew up swimming.
No,
And was a self-taught.
It's not
yes.
true. You know, Umele, who is known as Makanda, was one of the brilliant swimmers of his time.
Wow.
He
Wow.
could
Totally swim. Was it from Robben Island?
Robben Island.
Yes.
In fact, it was the third time that because he swam successfully. He swam successfully from the Robben Island to Blowback Strand 2 times. And he was caught on both times. And the third time, they decided to kill him. And they say he drowned.
Yes. And that is what is spoken about the most.
Yes.
As part of tarnishing.
Not about his success.
Yeah, not about his
Having swam
success.
so many
Yeah,
times.
you know him as Unele who swam
In
and
fact,
drowned.
you know, I also want to tell you something of another man that is not so spoken about. David Stearman. He was also in the Robben Island. He was also a very good swimmer. He was a Khoisan leader. And so they ended up taking him to Australia. You know, because they could not afford to have him escaping. So he's one of the titans of the frontier wars. You know, he led and fought from the front. Nabo Chungwa, Nabo Nile, and so on. So he died in Australia in exile.
But Zolan, it's 1990 in South Africa. Utata Mandela is released from jail in Mhlekazi.
Was it in February?
Yeah, February in Mhlekazi, And he spent a long time there. And definitely, without any shadow of doubt, when you went in, you were not born yet. When you went in, he comes back later. And upon his release, a huge man. I mean, a
giant.
global, international. I mean,
A giant of giants.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And
You know,
you
it's-
come and praise, sing. How does that come about?
Well, it's a culmination of several things. Many people would think that I actually started to salute Mandela with these oral renditions only when he came out of jail. I had imaginations of this giant, this freedom fighter.
Wow.
So even when I was at high school, I had started singing the praises as if I've seen him.
So you've never even seen the picture before? You've just
No,
imagined.
because his picture was banned and they used to put a cross in his
So
face.
you had to create a picture in your mind.
So we created a picture in our minds and sort of drawn this picture into a portrait, powerful portrait.
Wow.
That's why it was not difficult for me to come up with words and put them together spontaneously. As every time I see him and I have to introduce him in all these events, you know, keywords which people would relate to so easily. You know, once you say that, everybody can connect and they can see when Madiba rises, he has this demeanor, this aura, this huge presence, that he was definitely a figure who was, you know, reminiscent of being called a great revolutionary.
The imaginations about him, how do they come about? How do you get
It's
to
a spiritual
imagine?
thing. It's a spiritual thing that is spontaneous, that comes sometimes in your dream, but sometimes it just comes as you are meditating.
Before his release.
Long before his release. long before his release.
So you didn't go somewhere and say, hey, Ndimbongi, ndifuna ubonge lo Madiba?
No. Actually, when Madiba came and there were all these activities, it was the leadership of the ANC that said that there is no other person who must do this. Utatu Kobololo, Utatu Fatal, who were the biggest pioneers of the ANC in the Transkei at the time when the ANC was born. These are the people who identified me, who were always in trouble with the state apparatus of the regime. But they had me on several occasions. And they said, Mandela will be so impressed to hear this.
Wow. And that was your dream to meet him?
That the impact that he has made with his struggle and the struggle of the people of this country has even touched young people. I was 16 years.
16 years, wow.
So, of course, it's everyone's dream to meet an icon. Mandela is the icon of the people. I am sure my father had a dream of meeting him. So as my grandfather. So I had this a blessing.
Wow.
I take it as a blessing that I was made to welcome him with my own rendition.
Wow.
And speak to him and speak to the people and introduce him to the people before he utters the first word to the people.
Idutywa neKapa in 1990, miles apart. How do you get to Cape Town?
You know, some of these things are inexplicable. I never thought that at that time I would find myself in an aeroplane. And I never thought, I'm still trying to unwind, even to date, as to who booked my ticket.
Yes.
Yeah, because it was such a mystery.
Actually, you should have kept that ticket. that ticket should be hung
belongs to a
somewhere.
museum.
Yes, it belongs to a museum.
Yeah.
Yes.
And remember, there was no cell phone. There was, so then, but everything gets organized because I happened to be at that point in Mthatha at St. John's College. Let me just paint that picture. So 1989, Tate Wilton Mkwai, Walter Sisulu, Raymond Mhlaba, and others.
These are giants.
They get released. And at that time, there was still what is called Independence Stadium in Mthatha, which is no longer there now. It's a mall in that place.
Yes.
So,
a very busy one.
So I'm there. The stadium is full to capacity, and General Olomisa is here.
Wow.
And he is the host of this welcoming. Let me put it that way. So I come. I'm part of the organizing team, and then I've been placed that I will be welcoming these giants. So, you know, I move the whole stadium. And this is now a year before Mandela is released. And this was more like a test case on how South Africans will react when some of these icons are released. So they released these ones first. Were also very big names. You know, as I mentioned.
Stalwarts,
Yes, stalwarts of our struggle. People were in the front line. So I'm there and I shook the whole stadium. And it was very young. This is 1989.
And you were at 16 at the time, or 15?
15.
16, yeah. The following year, Mandela gets released. So with what I have done there in that event and other events in between, it was then obvious that I will then receive Mandela. Actually, there were 3 praise singers, or imbongi, let me call them with the correct term.
Imbongi Mhlekazi. Familiarize yourself with that. Imbongi.
It was Tatu Bongani Stole, who has passed on.
Yes.
It was Kurumani Mlanjeni, who has passed on, and it was myself.
Wow.
I was the youngest. I could be their son, could be their child. There's 2. But you see, I think the advantage was also the early understanding of the literature of the revolution.
So you're conscientized.
I was quite conscientized and politically aware. So
At that age, at 16?
At 16.
Wow.
So these 2 senior Imbu were older than me. They were, I wouldn't say they were not politically aware, but their content was more traditional and it didn't have the politics of the day, if I may put it that way.
Yes.
So what made me to be the highlight in these events is the fact that I was the youngest, very young. And then the content of the delivery was very relevant and customized
so you hit the right
to
notes.
to each occasion. And I am quite humbled by the impact these two that have had on me. And I respect them a lot because I've learned from them. And these two events were not our first interactions. There were festivals in the Transkei which were called Festac Festival, which were happening, which were always hosted at Unitra Stadium, the University of Transkei Stadium then.
It's Wusu now.
So in 1988, 1989, I entered competitions then. And these two gentlemen were always part of that competition. And sometimes they couldn't believe how I was winning in those competitions. So I'm trying to paint this picture that by the time Mandela comes to his home rally in Transkei, I was already at least a recognized young Imbongi. There. There again, I welcomed him there. So in Cape Town, it's Christopher Toise was another Mbongi there.
That you had to compete with.
Yes, not necessarily to compete, to share the stage with him, because we're not in the competition. And there's also another person that I wish also to use this opportunity to talk about him, is Umzingisi Kolisa. He was a powerful guy. So I'm saying that to sing the praises of Mandela, because you were compelled to sing his praises, because he was this revolutionary leader who stood for justice, for freedom, and for equality. And at that time, there were no issues, around him, and there are no issues even now as far as I'm concerned. He was our own Messiah who delivered us from this shameful regime of apartheid. So it was very easy to me to make all those compositions. Most of those compositions were made simultaneously. And it is only years later when I began to reflect and to write some of those. There is this poem which says Umbombai. Umbombai, I actually went to jail on the 23rd of August, 1988, in Lady Frere, because I delivered that poem. It was not necessarily dedicated to anyone, but it was just rubbishing the apartheid state. It is Sinyokolondwana zisibhayila.
Yes.
Ilanga liyandishiya kukude bhakubha. Sivakele isikhalo sabantwana beAfrika bemchila bemhesha uMbombayi besithi chosi indaba zolwimi. Wena wawukhe wayephipha isevova isiphansi komkhono uyawumaza uMbombayi. CB James silakanombinja. Bantonville Ndandendile. Choice assorted, Chase assorted. So this is a composition I did as a young person, but it then develops, into something that says that Mbombayi usinhlokothisile sizwe. Wena Mbombayi wathi uzanelizwe kanti ucela ilishwa. Wathi usinika inkululeko kanti ucela inkunkuma. Wathi wenza imbumba yamanyama kanti ucela imbumba yamanyama. Wazibiza ngoba ungomongameli kanti ngusimangandini. Wazibiza ngoba uyinkulumbuso kanti uyinkubabulo. Wazibiza ngoba uyipresident kanti uyipredator. Wazibiza ngoba uyiparamount chief kanti uyiparamount thief. Ubuyityila imali yethu wayimungula. Wayimbungunya de wayivungula. Wayivungula de wayivungulela nabanyothele wenu. It is that kind of a poem that really strike the chord on our people, especially those who are conscious of the revolution. To begin to say, listen to the metaphor, listen to the philosophy, listen to the message that is entailed, that is educating and conscientizing people at the same time, making the public aware that what you see is actually not what you're supposed to get. No, I was detained for a week, but then I was expelled from school.
And how old were you then when you got arrested?
In 1988, you can do the maths. I was actually 15.
15.
Yes, and then that's when my father went to go and look for a school for me elsewhere in St. John's College.
Because you were saying that you were troublesome now. You're getting trouble with the law.
I was expelled, yes.
Wow.
Yes.
Abazali bathini elo xesha? Because Mhlekazi, at that time, whoever become politically conscious, parents would say, mntanam.
Of course, my father was quite very worried and concerned because my big brother had also crossed into Lesotho to go and join, Umkhonto weSizwe. So he was worried that his two sons are going to, and not only about that, he was not worried about us getting involved in the revolution. He was worried that he was actually harassed a lot when my big brother. The security agencies were giving him sleepless nights to say that you are aware about these doings of your child.
Yes.
So he was worried about being subjected to that harassment again. And he spoke to me and to say that I appreciate the fact that you have this talent, of poetry and so on. Actually, it comes from the family lineage. But I would appreciate more if you would spend more of your time relating to issues of the classroom and the books.
Yes.
But Zolani, I want to ask you this question. I think in one of the interviews that you've done with some of the big media groups, you ask a question about having met, I think for the first time in 1990 with that Mandela, Madiba, and you said to him, here's the quote. You said, "Madiba's sense of humility rubbed off on me." That's what you said. Close quote. That his humility, when you met him, it rubbed off on you.
Yeah.
What did you mean by that?
This is very, very funny for me. And, when you sing praises for a giant like that, and then when you are going to go and take your seat, you are called by people who are in the decorum of the organization to go and shake his hand. As you are migrating towards him, he rises.
Wow.
He rises to give you a handshake and a hug.
Wow.
That to me, Madiba has done that on several occasions without fail. And one day, sitting in his house, together with a friend of mine who is a senior traditional leader, who was requesting Madiba to take him abroad to go and study. This friend, a relative of mine. Then Madiba says to him, "There is no need for you to leave the country in order to get education.
Yes.
This country and its institutions are well equipped and capable enough. Look at him.
Yes.
When he speaks, the nation listens.
Wow.
He has graduated from universities of this country. I don't see the need.
Yes.
I am readily available to assist you to enroll with one of our universities, and I'll give you all the financial support that you require." So that told me that Madiba over the years has also taken interest into who am I, and with what I do. He really appreciated it to the extent that I became part and parcel of all his events, unless I was occupied with something else that is in relation to my family. Whether he traveled locally or abroad, he wanted me to be there. I remember one day when we went to Libya and food was coming, Madiba man was very selfless. And as we were being served for dinner, the people who were waiters were bringing us in his own room, in his own presidential suite hotel there. Then he says, "No, start with this. These are my leaders."
Wow. Okay.
First give him the hope, and then you can then come to me after.
Wow. Selflessness.
Yeah,
right
very
there.
modest. Yeah. Very,
So he put himself last. He wanted you guys to be saved first.
That's the thing. That's the humility that Madiba.
In fact, Mhlekazi, you know what Zolani is saying? I've once, I was privileged to meet Madiba as well. When I think we had one of the school children that were going to play overseas.
Yes.
To play, I think, in a Danon competition in Horton in his house. And actually he met them, and then he was interested in them. He shook their hands, all of them. He was so interested in them. Asking them, as 9-year-olds.
What would you like to be?
And that humility.
Yes.
I understand you said it rubbed on you.
No.
Definitely. And
that's beautiful.
this is one thing that I think Madiba has exported to Africa and the world. And that's why today we are known as a country that can export the values of Ubuntu. It's through him.
Yeah. He epitomized the humility.
Absolutely. Yes.
In fact, there's that humility, that selflessness, that down-to-earth approach to life is what has helped us secure him in this podcast.
Yeah.
He could have easily said, but you see it in him. That's the importance.
Wow.
But I wanted to ask, the first day, the poem that you did for him, is it something that was spontaneous? Is it something you had written down?
No.
You are probably shorter than now at that time.
Yes.
Is this time
The
of
tower
event?
in
What do you say?
Look, when I knew, for instance, in the Welcome Home rally, which was now just a year later in 1991, that Madiba was going to come there. That one I was quite very nervous. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't sleep the whole night. There are two occasions where I couldn't sleep. It's that day and the 9th of May, 1994.
Yes.
Now, the Welcome Home rally, I couldn't because he was coming to his own, homestead in Chad for the first time to interface with his own people. And I have, as I've said, I have done some renditions prior to his release. So I did not prepare, but there were ideas that were going through my head and some things were coming in. But when I went in, I didn't have a structured rendition that I was going to deliver. But I made it so simple because Madiba is a Madiba.
Yes.
And I know the Madibas and who they are.
Yes.
And I knew his history. So what I simply did, which was easy for me, was to dwell on his cultural background and who he is, who made him who he is, and the role that he has played, and to actually perform and recite a rendition in a rally. It's much more easier than enkundleni yomthonyama. There isn't much of the philosophy that you have to employ, but you have to just employ an idiomatic expression and some metaphors here and there, so that you just relate to the crowd. But as I say, to sing the praises of Madiba has been one of the easiest function for me to do. Very, very easy. I did not have to scratch my head or break my jaws. I was quite very affluent.
It came naturally.
It came natural because it is something that I was feeling, inside me, So the words were just coming in my belly, and my mouth was just,
But Zolani, you traveled with Madiba, Tata, for more than 13 years, going abroad. I mean, you said literally he'll call you, he'll call him, and you have to go and do praise singing for him. And in those moments, I'm imagining you going to Europe. It's a long travel in aeroplane. You're sitting with him. What are some of the lessons that personally shared with you that built you, that you still remember them, and they made you who you are today? Some of the first lessons that he taught you.
No, let me first correct this and say that he did not ask me to praise his to praise him.
It came from you.
No, the early years created a bond between me and him. The early interactions, which then propelled the people in his office to relate to me, to call me.
So you clicked with him.
I clicked with him. So Mary Mgadana, who was the personal assistant, the late may her soul rest in peace, used to be the one who called. And the later years, I would get a call either from Zelda Rechranj, who was also at one point the personal assistant. John Samuels was the first CEO of the foundation. So all of these people, around his office would call. But also people who hosted him in events would call me. Not necessarily his office.
Oh, okay.
For instance, Macmillan was doing a series of the books. It's important for me to say this because Mandela never took interest that he wants to be praised. But it is the people who knew that this that I was doing was actually lifting on him. You know, Mama Graka once alluded to this.
Wow.
That, in one day he was to go to his own lecture, and he said, my presence there lifted his spirit
When
because,
he was down,
because he was so down on that
Gee.
day. He was feeling a little bit
Yes,
ill,
yes.
but when I came in,
Yeah.
I gave him, that kind of.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure if I have answered your question before I take his
No,
question.
I think you haven't.
I was coming to a
some,
question.
the lessons that you've
The
learned from
lessons,
him, yeah.
I have learned, this thing of reconciliation. I took interest to it,
Yes.
and I learned how he does it. One way which I can explain to you, Gaddafi was having a problem of the Lockerbie aircraft which was downed in Scotland, and he was accused that he was behind that. Madiba liked Gaddafi very much. He was a very good friend of him.
Yeah.
And he knew that Gaddafi was hated by the Western powers. Now he wanted to convince him to say, allow the investigation to take place,
Yes.
to actually come to the conclusion as to who did this. So release these people who are alleged to have committed this. So he convinced him, to do that. And then he says, this will open the economy of Libya. And Libya is a rich country, and everything is at your disposal. You are in charge,
Yes.
but you are frustrated by just this thing. So he negotiated that. And I was so happy that Madiba introduces me to Gaddafi. He didn't necessarily say that do something for him.
Yeah.
Yeah, but he says, this is like a brother to me, And then Gaddafi invites me over. Gaddafi is a different character.
Yes.
He's very robustful,
Yeah.
and he's a charisma. Both of them have charisma, but the charisma of Gaddafi is very aggressive.
Yes. Yeah.
So Gaddafi says, my son, do a song for me. So I'm trying to say,
Yes.
I learned that Madiba was actually saying, if you can, do something for Gaddafi, for this act of goodness. You understand? So he spoke in ways that were symbolic. And I got to understand his philosophy in life. So he lived this thing of nation building and reconciliation. Madiba believed that problems can never be solved if the tempers are high,
Yes.
if people are intoxicated with anger,
Yeah.
if people are emotional. There is one senior politician in the country who was angered by his province to the extent that he wrote a very strong worded letter to Mandela saying that he is resigning his position as the premier. Madiba just gave him a call and he says, you don't take decisions when you are emotional. Withdraw that letter.
Yeah.
And the case was closed.
And that was the end of it.
Wow.
So I learned that wisdom. He is a man of wisdom. And one time he asked me, I'm sharing this because
Yes.
you are trapping me to share them, because I thought I would share them when I write my book.
Yes. Please. Well, it's an honor. It's a privilege.
Yeah.
Well, I don't mind to say this. He asked me one day, are they taking care of you?
Wow.
What can we do for you?
Wow.
So my answer to him was that I said, yes, no, they are taking care of me. What can we do for you? Know that I don't need to be paid for this, because I am working unemployed. All I need from you is to support me with some projects that are related to community development. So anything that I would take to him, he would sign it with ease.
Wow.
So for me,
Yeah.
that was worth more than being given a honorarium here and there.
And you do it out of love.
And I'm doing it
passion,
out of
yeah.
love. I did not want to be rich. And I could hear many people saying that the position that you hold, you're going to be rich and so on. I was never really there. And I actually got all the offers from certain quarters to say, if you do this, you do that. But I was never interested in those things. So I learned that wisdom. I learned that selflessness. I learned, this humaneness
Yeah.
on the true meaning of love. I mean, he took me like his own child. he asked me to work closely with Mandela,
Yeah.
who is his grandson, and assist him. And this was long before Mandla went to school. And he said, I want you to work closely with Mandla so that you can share things with him, that are related to our own traditions.
So in essence, he took you like a son.
He took me like his own child. Wow. Similarly, Gaddafi did the same. Similarly, Yasser Arafat did the same. I mean, every year I went to Libya. Gaddafi even gave me a house in the Bab al-Baha in Libya. I had a 3-bedroom flat in the
Wow, okay.
right in the gate of Tripoli. So, because Gaddafi was a different character,
yes.
it was his way of showing appreciation.
Yes.
And he always wanted me to go there on annual basis. From 1999, I went to Libya maybe 3 times a year until 2011. My last meeting with him was on January 2011.
Wow.
The year he was to be killed. Yes.
I was actually about to ask, his killing, assassination must have had quite an effect on you then.
A very, very bad one. A very, very bad one. To the extent that President Mandela is still alive at the time Gaddafi is killed. And Mandela was very close to Gaddafi. He could not be told about Gaddafi. But Mama Kraka had to say to Madiba that Gaddafi got into a very serious accident. He is hospitalized. So he prepared him.
Yes.
But in the final analysis, he then told him days later that he actually succumbed. Then Mandela then says that Mandla and myself must go to the funeral. So he was not told that Gaddafi was never buried.
Oh.
But his word when he heard that Gaddafi has passed on, he said that man was good to us.
Yes.
That's his word. This was said to me by Mama Kraka when I went to interface with her after the passing on of Gaddafi. So I'm saying that Gaddafi was very instrumental in the life of Madiba. Even in the 90th birthday or 80th birthday, Gaddafi could not attend those events. But Madiba would insist on Gaddafi recording a video so that it gets played.
Wow.
That's how close. And he knew that the Americans would be there in that event. Bill Clinton was amongst them. But he had to listen to Gaddafi. And he actually educated the Americans that you cannot choose friends for us. Allow us to have our own relationships. And we have our own relationship with you, but we have other relations with other people because of a particular history. So these are the things that I have learned from him and from the people that he introduced me to. And I really appreciate it. And I think these things are priceless. And I'm busy trying to put a book. It's a very difficult book for me to put because it's very emotional. I don't know whether I should first deliver a book of historical renditions or a book of my relations.
Or a memorial lecture.
Yeah,
actually, he could do, Zolani could do a memorial lecture.
You could do both.
All of them. And when that book comes out, we will ask him to come and talk about that book, zooming to detail into the book and go into even greater detail.
Let's take the question from the audience.
That's the great. How far with the Ancestors Day, the initiative that you started?
Yes.
We started the Ancestors Day in 2021. We launched it. And last year we did the 2nd edition at the Cradle of Humankind. 2023 marks the 3rd edition. And this year, now I have to break the news that we're intending to actually launch a festival in honor of the ancestors around the same period.
Wow. Wow.
So that's the extent to which we have gone with the Ancestors Day. We're also busy with the launch of the Ancestors Day Foundation. Because what we want to do with that instrument is to take this project to the continent and the diaspora. Because the Ancestors Day celebrates and honor the African ancestors here and elsewhere in the world. Remember that there are our ancestors that left our shores through abomination of slave trade and so on and so forth. So we have to relate to those. Marcus Garvey is our ancestor
Oh.
Martin Luther is our
Yes.
ancestor. You understand? Similarly, they know that King Yinza here and King Mshweshwe there is their ancestor. So we have to dovetail this and not make it that the African continent is not only the physical geographical space that is here.
Those who in the diaspora as well.
Those who are there
Yeah.
also belongs to Africa, and Africa belongs to them.
But Zolani, again, I think speaking about the humanity that you've learned from Tata Mandela, and I think it shows also, I want to talk about your organization you formed, the Mkhiva Foundation, which I believe it also speaks about the issues of improving education, especially in the rurals where you come from.
Actually, it's
You
Madiba himself who advised me before retirement from office that I must have something that I should be doing, which is going to be more coordinated, more guided through an instrument. So I chose to do this, not in my name. The Mkhiva Humanitarian Foundation, I actually named it after my grandfather, who was in the struggle himself. But I'm the founder and I'm the leader of that foundation. So I do this work, you know, to uplift the rural communities of our society. And so we focus on education, we focus on culture, we focus on issues that are related to social development. These are the three areas. I work with a number of schools. There are about 10 high schools in my area that we have adopted through the foundation, and 11 primary schools. 46 primary schools.
Yeah.
So we help them with sporting equipment, with things that are related to culture, events, and so on, to bring recreation to those areas. As well as we do an international program as well called the Mkhiva Humanitarian Awards.
Okay.
So if you go online, you will see that we have honored Madiba himself as a global champion for people's freedom. The same category, we also honored Fidel Castro. Fidel Castro did not, in his lifetime, appreciate the issue of being given accolades. But this one, he said he will take it.
Wow.
So we have honored also posthumously Olof Palme of Sweden, who was an outspoken prime minister of that country who fought against the apartheid regime. And it is believed that in 1986, actually, he was killed by the mercenaries who flew all the way from here to there to shoot him when he was coming out of a cinema. So we have through these awards, we have created so much relationships and networks globally. In Russia, in Venezuela, in Colombia, where we are honoring and thanking people, including the Scandinavians, for the role that they played in our struggle, you know, for our own liberation. So there are different categories, but that's another subject altogether. But that's the work that the foundation. So I've just given you what we do at grassroots and what we do at a high level. Yes.
Fantastic.
No, that's amazing, Mshaz. And it's actually, you know, when you speak to somebody who has interacted not only with one global icon, Utatu Mandela, but with many other leaders as well, and remain humble and not even one said, you know, because I've had wisdom of many people. And because we are sitting here threatened by load shedding and things like that. Even now this production is threatened by load shedding. If we don't stop, the lights will go off. But it must be one of the things that even Utata would say, ish, this is a problem for the country. And I hope that part of what your foundation will do is to instill values of selfless leadership in those schools, so that you breed students who become leaders, who are selfless, who don't put them first and contribute to societal upliftment, to fight things such as this load shedding and many other things that are actually you know, threatening our society. You know, we can talk. There's actually quite a lot we can cover. I think because we've just scratched the surface. And as he talks, he opens up a lot of things that one day we will get into and then actually expand even more. There's a lot of wisdom. These are untold stories. These are stories which people never get to hear. And I'm glad that Opudi came and we tapped into his wisdom, his experience, and everything. But it's a
No, we're so honored.
No, kubonga mna, and thank you for having me again. It's good that I speak to people of your generation because it means one is investing into the future. Because you are the future, and you are the people who will take the baton and lead this country. With the respect of the load shedding and other challenges, Madiba, if I may quote him, he usually says, "This is it."
Yes. No, come back. He left now in the dark.
No, it all seems.
Right.
It all seems impossible until it is done.
Wow.
So we can turn around the situation, and I think we have a task to do so.
Just like it is impossible to end load shedding until it's done, it will end.
It will end.
Possible.
That's a rap.
Yeah.